A trembling little girl whispered, "Sir, can I have the leftover bread?" And every conversation in the luxury restaurant stopped cold. All eyes turned to Keanu Reeves, sitting alone at his table. No one could have imagined that his next move would change that girl's life and reveal the kind of man he truly is. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The rain had not stopped for 2 days. It drizzled, then poured, then softened again into a mist that made the streetlights look like distant stars. On the sidewalks of downtown Los Angeles, puddles shimmered beneath the glow of neon signs. Cars rushed past, splashing water onto the cracked pavement, but no one noticed the small figure sitting under the edge of an awning. Lila pulled her knees close to her chest, wrapping the red scarf around her neck until only her eyes were visible. The scarf was old, frayed at the edges, but it still smelled faintly like her mother's soap, vanilla, and something warm she couldn't describe. Her mother had worn it the night she was taken to the hospital, the night everything changed. That was 3 weeks ago, though to Lila it felt like a year. The hospital had said they would take care of her mother. They'd told Lila to stay with a family friend until things got better. But the friend never came, and so Lila waited. Then waited some more. Eventually, she stopped waiting altogether. Now every night was the same. She wandered the streets until her legs ached, searching for somewhere safe to sleep, somewhere the cold couldn't reach her bones. She'd found a spot behind a bakery where warm air leaked through a metal vent. At night, the smell of bread filled the alley, yeast, butter, and sugar mixing in the air until it made her dizzy. Sometimes she dreamed about that smell. In her dreams, her mother was there too, breaking warm rolls in half and whispering, "Always share, Lila, even when you have little." Tonight, the vent wasn't enough. The wind was sharper than usual, and her thin jacket couldn't block it. Her shoes were soaked. The cardboard she used as a blanket had turned to mush. She pressed her palms to her empty stomach. It growled, deep and angry, a sound that echoed in her ribs. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, a half of a banana she'd found in a trash bin near the park. The thought of food made her mouth water and her chest ache at the same time, but she refused to beg. Her mother's words always echoed in her mind. "Hold your head high, my brave girl." Lila had tried. She really had. But hunger didn't care about pride. Across the street, she saw the golden glow of a restaurant. The sign read, "Valaro's Bistro," written in looping letters above tall windows. Through the glass, she could see people in clean clothes, sitting at white tables, laughing and eating food that looked too beautiful to touch. A waiter poured wine into glasses that sparkled under the chandeliers. Someone clinked a fork against a plate and laughed loudly. The sound hit her like a punch. Her fingers tightened on the scarf. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. Her eyes locked on the small basket of bread on a nearby table. 4 pieces perfect, warm, untouched. Just one would be enough. Maybe even half of one. She stood on her toes, pressing her hands to the glass, the cold seeping through her skin. For a second, she imagined stepping inside, sitting down, being handed something warm to eat. But she knew better. People didn't look at kids like her with kindness. They looked at her like she was dirt on their shoes. A car horn blared nearby. She startled and stepped back, almost slipping in the puddle at her feet. Her heart pounded. She could leave, try another alley, find some leftovers behind the grocery store where the bins weren't locked. But the smell of food inside the restaurant was too strong, too close. It wrapped around her like invisible hands, pulling her toward the door. She took one shaky breath, then another. Maybe if she asked quietly, they wouldn't yell. Maybe they'd give her just one small piece of bread. Her mother had said there were still good people in the world. Lila wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe it so badly that it hurt. She stepped toward the door, her reflection rippling across the glass like a ghost. Inside, laughter echoed again, bright and careless. She pressed her hand against her stomach and whispered to herself, "Just one bite, please, just one." The rain picked up, pattering against the windows. Lila took another step closer to the glowing door. Her moment of decision had come. She waited outside the restaurant door, trembling as the rain dripped from her hair. Every time the door opened, a rush of warmth and laughter spilled into the street, only to vanish when it closed again. The smell of roasted meat and baked bread made her knees weak. Her small hand hovered near the door handle, but she hesitated. What if they yelled? What if they sent her away again? A man in a dark coat brushed past her, glancing down with annoyance before stepping inside. He didn't see her, not really. No one ever did. She was just another shadow in the rain. Lila swallowed hard, the lump in her throat burning. She turned away, pulling her scarf tighter, trying to convince herself to leave. Then, her stomach cramped again. The pain bent her forward, forcing a small cry from her lips. She pressed her hand against her ribs, waiting for it to pass. When it did, she looked back at the window and saw the bread still sitting there, untouched. Something inside her broke. She took one small step toward the door, then another. Her shoes squished with every move, leaving muddy prints behind her. She reached the entrance just as the waiter opened it to greet new guests. Lila froze, eyes wide, face pale. The waiter frowned, ready to shoo her away. But before he could speak, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain, "Sir, can I have the leftover bread?" For a heartbeat, the city seemed to go silent. The laughter inside faded. Even the rain sounded softer. The waiter stared, unsure what to do. And just beyond the crowded tables, one man looked up from his plate, his calm gray eyes locking on hers. It was Keanu Reeves. Keanu's gaze lingered on the small figure standing in the doorway, soaked to the bone. The dim restaurant light caught the raindrops on her hair, turning them into tiny jewels that clung stubbornly to her curls. Lila's hands trembled as she held the red scarf close to her face. For a second, no one spoke. Then a woman at the nearest table muttered, "Someone get her out of here." The waiter cleared his throat, looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry, miss," he said sharply to the girl. "You can't be here." Lila flinched but didn't move. Her lips parted as if to apologize, but only a weak sound escaped. The waiter took a step forward, ready to usher her out. That's when Keanu rose from his chair. His movement was calm, almost too quiet for the tension in the room. The silverware clinked against his plate as he stood. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the music seemed to lower itself. He looked at the waiter, then at the girl. His voice was gentle, but firm. She asked for bread. The waiter blinked, unsure how to respond. Keanu's tone didn't rise, but something in it demanded obedience. "Bring her inside," he said. "Please." A few guests exchanged uneasy looks. One man whispered, "That's Keanu Reeves, isn't it?" Another shook his head in disbelief. "What's he doing?" The waiter hesitated, then slowly stepped aside. "Come in," he murmured awkwardly. Lila's eyes widened. For a moment, she thought it was a cruel trick, but the man who had spoken to her wasn't angry. He didn't look disgusted. He just waited, steady and patient, like he had all the time in the world. When she finally stepped inside, warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. Her soaked shoes squeaked on the polished floor. She looked small against the marble walls and velvet chairs. The scent of bread and roasted garlic filled her senses, almost dizzying in its richness. She glanced up once more at Keanu. His eyes were calm, steady, kind. He nodded toward the empty chair beside him. "Come," he said softly. "You wanted bread. Let's start with that." And with that single act, the world she knew began to change. The rain had softened into a slow drizzle by the time Keanu Reeves stepped into the quiet warmth of Vallaro's Bistro. The place was known for its exclusivity, low lights, jazz humming from hidden speakers, and waiters who moved like whispers. But tonight, Keanu wasn't there for luxury. He was there for silence. He'd spent the entire day at a charity gala supporting children's hospitals in downtown Los Angeles, Flashbulbs, cameras, speeches, it was a good cause, but it left him drained. Every question from reporters had circled back to fame, money, or his next film, and he had smiled through all of it. But once it was done, he asked his driver to drop him off somewhere quiet. Somewhere without red carpets or microphones. The host recognized him immediately, but said nothing. Keanu nodded politely and took a small table by the window, away from the main crowd. No entourage, no assistants, just him. He removed his coat, ordered tea instead of wine, and asked for the simplest thing on the menu: a bowl of soup and a slice of steak. For a few peaceful minutes, he watched the rain slide down the glass. The world outside looked softer when blurred by water. He could almost pretend that it was another time before the cameras, before the chaos. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound of rain against the window replace the noise in his head. The waiter returned, placing a basket of warm bread on the table. Steam rose from it, carrying the comforting scent of butter and yeast. Keanu broke off a small piece, dipped it in olive oil, and took a slow bite. Simple, honest. That was all he ever really wanted these days. He didn't notice her at first. The reflection on the window blurred her outline. But as he reached for his cup, movement caught his attention. A small hand pressed against the glass. He looked up. Outside, in the pale light of the street lamp, a little girl stood motionless. She was tiny, soaked through, her jacket hanging off her shoulders. Her hair clung to her face, and her scarf, bright red even under the rain, was wrapped too tightly around her neck. Her eyes, wide and glassy, weren't on him. They were fixed on the breadbasket on his table. Keanu froze. Something about that look, silent, hungry, desperate, cut through him. He'd seen those eyes before. Not in another person, but in the mirror of his own childhood. He set his cup down and turned toward the window. The girl didn't move, not even when she realized he was looking back. Keanu's eyes stayed locked on the little girl. Around him, the restaurant carried on as if nothing had changed. Forks clinked against porcelain, wine glasses sparkled, and laughter floated through the air. Yet for Keanu, the world had gone quiet. All he could see was the child outside the glass, her small frame trembling in the cold, her breath leaving faint circles of fog on the window pane. He signaled to the waiter. "Excuse me," he said softly, his voice steady. "Do you see that girl outside?" The waiter leaned closer, following his gaze. "Ah, yes, sir. She's been loitering around the front for a few evenings now. Security usually tries to keep her from bothering the guests." "Bothering?" Keanu's tone shifted just slightly, calm, but with an edge that made the waiter stand straighter. "She's a child." The waiter hesitated. "Of course, sir, but this is a fine establishment. We can't have—" Keanu's eyes didn't leave the window. "You can't have what?" The waiter swallowed hard. "I just meant we can't have street children wandering in. It makes guests uncomfortable." Keanu finally turned his head, and for the first time the waiter met his eyes. There was no anger there, only quiet disappointment, the kind that made people realize how small their excuses sounded. "She's standing in the rain," Keanu said. "Get her something warm to eat." The waiter blinked. "Sir? You heard me." His tone was gentle, almost kind, but it left no room for argument. "Bring her inside. Give her something hot. Soup, bread, whatever the kitchen has ready." The waiter fidgeted with his notepad. "It's against policy, sir." "We can't just—" Keanu leaned back slightly, folding his hands on the table. "Then, consider it my order, and put it on my tab." For a moment, the waiter didn't move. The hum of the restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Then, reluctantly, he nodded. "As you wish, Mr. Reeves." Keanu didn't correct him. He wasn't doing this for attention, and he certainly didn't want his name whispered around the room. He only wanted that child to stop standing in the cold, staring at something as simple as bread, like it was a miracle. He turned back to the window. The girl was still there, her tiny hands pressed against the glass. The rain had flattened her hair against her forehead, and her scarf clung to her chin like a lifeline. She looked ready to turn away, ready to disappear back into the shadows. But not tonight, Keanu thought. Not this time. Outside, Lila took a hesitant step back from the window. She thought she had made a mistake by standing there too long. People inside were beginning to notice. A woman in pearls whispered something to her husband, who frowned and shook his head. Another diner sighed impatiently when the waiter opened the door, as if kindness might slow down their evening. Lila lowered her gaze, ashamed. She didn't want to cause trouble. She just wanted to stop feeling hungry. The waiter stepped into the rain, his tone clipped but uncertain. "You there," he said, glancing around as if embarrassed to be seen talking to her. "Come in, quickly." Lila froze. For a moment she thought he was angry, that he might push her away like others had done before. Her fingers gripped the edge of her scarf tightly. Did I do something wrong?" she whispered. The waiter sighed, glancing back toward the tables inside. "Someone wants to see you." Her heart skipped. "Someone? Why?" She hesitated another moment before the wind cut through her again, sharp and cold. Slowly, she stepped forward. The warmth from inside spilled over her like sunlight. When she crossed the threshold, everything changed. The noise, the smell, the light. It was too much, all at once. The air smelled of garlic and rosemary, of fresh bread and melting butter. Her stomach growled loudly, and she flinched, afraid everyone had heard. And they had. Conversations paused. Heads turned. The waiter led her across the room. Her wet shoes squeaked with every step, and she stared at the floor to avoid the eyes that followed her. Every few seconds, she stole a glance toward the man sitting alone by the window. He didn't look like the others. He wasn't dressed in a suit, and his face wasn't hard. He looked calm, tired maybe, but kind. When she reached his table, she stopped a few feet away, unsure what to do. Her hands fidgeted with the scarf. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I didn't mean to." Keanu's voice cut through gently. "You're not in trouble." Her head lifted. He gestured to the chair beside him. "Come, sit down. You must be freezing." She blinked, unsure if she'd heard him right. I can't. I'm dirty." He gave a faint smile. "So is the world sometimes." He nodded toward the chair again. "Please." Cautiously, she climbed onto the seat. The chair was tall, and her legs dangled above the floor. She didn't touch anything. Her eyes darted between the bread basket and the people still staring from other tables. Keanu noticed and leaned forward slightly, his tone calm but clear. "They can eat without staring. Go ahead." "You wanted bread?" Lila's face flushed. "Just one piece, sir. I don't want to take too much." He shook his head. "Take as much as you need." Her fingers trembled as she reached out. She tore a small piece from the warm roll and placed it carefully in her mouth. The taste hit her like a wave. Soft, salty, warm. She chewed slowly, savoring every bite. Her eyes filled with tears before she could stop them. Keanu didn't speak. He just watched her quietly, his face softening. When she finished the first piece, he nodded to the waiter. "Get her something warm. Soup, maybe. And don't make it small." The waiter, now visibly moved, nodded quickly and hurried toward the kitchen. Lila wiped her eyes. "Why are you being nice to me?" Keanu leaned back slightly, his voice low. "Because you're hungry. That's reason enough." For the first time in days, Lila smiled. A small, fragile smile, but real. And as Keanu looked at her, he felt something stir deep within him, a memory, a recognition of a pain he once knew too well. Tonight had started as a quiet dinner, but it would become something far greater. The steam from the soup curled softly into the air, carrying the scent of chicken and thyme across the table. Lila's small hands hovered over the bowl as if afraid it might vanish if she touched it too soon. Her eyes darted toward Keanu, seeking silent permission. He gave a slow nod, and she finally lifted the spoon. The first sip burned her tongue a little, but she didn't care. It was warmth, real warmth, filling a stomach that had forgotten what comfort felt like. She took another spoonful, then another, pausing between each, as though trying to make it last forever. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "It's good." Keanu smiled faintly. "I'm glad." Across the restaurant, whispers rose like low waves. People leaned toward each other, pretending to talk about their meals while stealing glances at the unlikely pair. A famous actor dining with a drenched little girl who looked like she belonged nowhere near white tablecloths. It didn't fit into their world. But Keanu didn't hear them, or maybe he chose not to. His attention stayed on Lila. He noticed how her shoulders hunched slightly, as if trying to make herself smaller, invisible. He recognized that posture. It was the same way he used to sit when life had been too heavy to understand. After a while, when her spoon slowed, he spoke gently. "You said your mom is in the hospital?" Lila nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "She got sick a few weeks ago. They said she needed to stay there for medicine. I tried to visit, but they told me I wasn't allowed to sleep there." She bit her lip, staring into the bowl. "I waited outside for a few days, but then they moved her somewhere else. I didn't know where to go." Keanu's chest tightened. "You've been alone since then?" She nodded. No. Sometimes I sell flowers. I go to the street where all the cars stop at night. I hold them up when the light turns red. Some people buy one. Some just roll up their windows." He listened, without interrupting. His voice stayed steady, not pitying, not shocked, just kind. "You've been taking care of yourself." "I try," she said softly. "But it's cold now, and no one wants flowers in the rain." He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. "You're stronger than most people I know." Her eyes flicked up to his, surprised. "You really think so?" He nodded. "I know so." For the first time that night, Lila let out a small, shaky laugh. It was quiet and uncertain, but it carried something fragile hope. The waiter returned with a small teapot and a delicate white cup. Steam drifted upward as he poured, the scent of chamomile filling the air. Lila watched as Keanu thanked the waiter softly, his tone patient, his smile gentle. When the man walked away, she looked down at the cup in front of her. "I've never had tea before," she admitted. Keanu tilted his head. "Then tonight's a first." She cupped it in both hands, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. She took a small sip and made a face. "It's bitter," he chuckled quietly. "That's why we have sugar." He slid the small bowl toward her, and she hesitated before adding one spoonful, then another. "Better?" he asked. Lila nodded shyly. "Much." For a few minutes, they sat in silence, the quiet kind that didn't need to be filled. Rain tapped lightly against the windows, and the city lights outside shimmered like gold dust. The restaurant had calmed. Even those who'd whispered before were now watching with softer eyes, though Lila didn't notice. When she finished her soup, she leaned back and wiped her mouth with the napkin the way she'd seen others do. Then, her voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you think my mom's okay?" Keanu took a breath before answering. "I think your mom would be proud of you. You've done something very brave tonight." Her brows furrowed. "Brave?" He nodded. "It takes courage to ask for help when you need it. Most people are too afraid." She stared at him for a moment, then looked down at her empty bowl. "I didn't think anyone would listen. People usually pretend they don't hear me. They hear you," he said quietly. "They just forget how to care." Lila thought about that for a while, tracing the edge of the table with her small fingers. "You care." Keanu didn't respond right away. He looked at her hands, at the chipped nail polish and the faint cuts on her knuckles. Finally, he said, "Someone once cared for me when I didn't expect it. I'm just returning the favor." She tilted her head. "Did someone give you food too?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Not food. Exactly. But they gave me a reason to believe things could get better." Lila nodded slowly, as if she understood. She reached for the last piece of bread in the basket and broke it in half. She pushed one half toward him. "Then you should have some too." He smiled, accepting it. Fair trade. And in that quiet moment, two hands, two halves of a single roll, the noise of the restaurant disappeared. Keanu set the half piece of bread on his plate, breaking it gently before taking a bite. The warmth, the simplicity of it, reminded him of evenings long before fame, when dinner had been nothing more than toast and tea. He glanced at Lila, who was sitting straighter now, her cheeks less pale, her eyes brighter from the meal, and the warmth that surrounded her. "Where will you sleep tonight?" he asked quietly. She looked down, twisting her scarf between her fingers. "I don't know. I used to stay behind a bakery, but they put up a fence. Sometimes I go to the park benches when it's not raining, or under the bridge near the bus stop. It's loud there, but it's dry." The words cut into him like a blade. He tried to picture a child alone under a bridge, and the thought made his chest ache. "That's not a place for you," he said, softly. "You should be somewhere safe, with a roof, a warm bed." She shrugged. "It's okay, I'm used to it." "No," he said, his tone firmer now, but still kind. "You shouldn't have to get used to it." Her small shoulders lifted, uncertain. "It's just for now. When my mom gets better, we'll find a house again," she promised. He nodded slowly, the faintest smile crossing his face. "Then I'll help make sure she can keep that promise." Lila blinked. "You'll help us?" "Yes," he said simply. "Tonight, you'll come with me. I know a place where you can stay warm and sleep safely." Her lips parted in disbelief. "You mean, like a house? Something close," he said. "It's a shelter I support. Good people work there. You'll have food, clean clothes, and a bed that's yours." She hesitated, the suspicion of a child who had been disappointed too many times. "Why would you do that for me?" Keanu leaned back, meeting her gaze. "Because no one should be alone in the rain, especially not a child." She stared at him for a long time, her eyes glistening with tears that she tried to hide. "If my mom were here," she whispered, "she'd say you have a kind soul." He smiled gently. "Then your mom sounds like a wise woman." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, but inside the bistro, a rare calm settled over the room. For the first time in days, Lila's stomach was full, her body warm, and her heart, though still fragile, felt the faint pulse of hope. Keanu gestured toward the door. "Finish your tea, Lila. When you're ready, we'll go." She nodded, holding the cup with both hands, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. That night, a man seeking peace and a child seeking mercy found both across a single table, through silence, warmth, and the simple sharing of bread. When they stepped out of the restaurant, the night air hit them like a wave of cold. The rain had returned, steadier now, falling in silver streaks under the streetlights. Keanu slipped his black jacket from his shoulders and draped it over Lila. It hung almost to her knees, the sleeves covering her hands completely. She looked up at him, startled. "It's too big," she said softly. "That's the point," he replied, pulling the collar gently around her neck. "Keeps you warm." The fabric smelled faintly of rain, leather, and something clean like cedar. She hugged it close, her teeth still chattering. The warmth from the jacket seeped into her body, slowly replacing the chill that had sunk deep into her bones. Keanu adjusted his cap lower over his face as they started walking toward the parking lot. A few people leaving the restaurant turned their heads, recognizing him for a split second before doubting their eyes. He moved quietly, his long stride steady, never letting go of the small hand tucked inside his. They passed a group of photographers huddled near the main street. They were waiting for a celebrity couple rumored to be dining nearby, their cameras ready. None of them paid attention to the tall man and the little girl walking in the rain. His face was hidden, and fame had no light to catch in that moment. When they reached his car, a simple, black SUV, he opened the back door first. Lila hesitated, staring at the spotless leather interior. She looked like she didn't dare touch it. "It's okay," Keanu said, gesturing her inside. "You're safe here." She climbed in slowly, her small hands brushing against the seat like it might crumble under her fingers. The door shut with a quiet click, sealing them inside the warm hum of the car. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The sound of the rain filled the silence, soft but constant. Keanu started the engine, the dashboard glowing faintly blue. The heater came on, blowing warmth across the cabin. Lila turned toward the window, watching droplets race each other down the glass. Her reflection stared back at her small, pale, but alive. She pulled the jacket tighter and whispered, "I can't believe I'm in a car again." Keanu glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "When's the last time you were in one?" She thought for a moment. "The ambulance. When they took my mom." He nodded slowly, his heart sinking. "She must be strong." "She is," Lila said quickly. "She'll get better. I know she will." Keanu smiled faintly. "You sound just like her." The city lights shimmered across the wet streets as they pulled away from the restaurant, heading into the night. The city slid past them in glistening streaks of light, reflections stretching across the wet asphalt like ribbons. Lila pressed her forehead gently against the cold window, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass. The world outside looked dreamlike, hazy, and distant, as if it belonged to someone else. Inside the car, it was quiet except for the hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of the wipers. After a while, she turned slightly. "You really don't have to take me," she said softly. "I can find another place." Keanu glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "I know you can," he said, his voice calm, "but you shouldn't have to." She looked down at her hands, hidden inside his jacket sleeves. "People don't usually stop for me," she murmured. "Sometimes they cross the street so they don't have to look." He nodded, his expression unreadable in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. "I know that feeling," he said after a pause. "You do?" "Yeah," he replied quietly. "When I was little, my mom and I moved around a lot. Toronto, New York, then back again. There were times when we didn't have much. I remember sitting in a cafe once, staring at people eating warm food while we shared a single cup of tea." Lila turned toward him, eyes wide. "You were poor?" He gave a faint smile. "Poor in money, maybe, but not in love. My mom worked 2 jobs just to keep us going. She used to tell me, 'You can lose everything in life, but never lose your kindness.' That stayed with me." Lila listened silently, her gaze fixed on him. The hum of the tires filled the space between them. She finally said, "Your mom sounds like mine." Keanu nodded slowly. "Then you're lucky. You've got her strength." Lila's lips pressed together as she tried to hold back tears. "She always told me that too," she whispered. "That I had to stay strong, even when I'm scared." Keanu's hand rested lightly on the steering wheel. "You've done more than stay strong. You've survived." The words lingered in the air, warm and steady. Lila looked out the window again, watching the rain trace new paths down the glass. For the first time in weeks, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: safe. They drove deeper into the city, leaving behind the busy lights of downtown for quieter streets lined with old apartment buildings and small corner stores closing for the night. The rain softened into a mist, drifting through the glow of the street lamps. Lila's eyelids grew heavy as the hum of the engine lulled her, but she fought to stay awake. She didn't want to fall asleep and wake up to find it had all been a dream. Keanu noticed her eyes drooping and said softly, "You can rest if you want. It's a bit of a drive. I don't want to miss where we're going," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "Fair enough. You like to be in control, huh?" She tilted her head. "I just like knowing what's next. When you live outside, you always have to think about what comes after. Where to go when the rain starts. Where to hide when people yell." His expression darkened for a moment. "That's too much for someone your age to carry." She hugged his jacket closer around her, her voice small. "You get used to it." Keanu didn't answer right away. The city slid by in silence, the glow of red lights washing over his face as they stopped at an intersection. Then he said quietly, "You know, people always say that phrase, 'you get used to it,' but the truth is, no one really should. Some things aren't meant to be normal." Lila watched his reflection in the window. "Like what?" "Like hunger, or loneliness, or kids sleeping on concrete instead of beds." She nodded slowly. "You talk like my mom. She used to say the same things, that the world forgets what it's supposed to care about." Keanu exhaled deeply. Your mom sounds like someone worth meeting." A faint smile touched Leela's lips. "She is. She's really brave. When she got sick, she told me not to cry. She said tears make you weak. But I think she just didn't want me to see her scared." He looked at her through the mirror, his eyes soft. "Crying doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." She didn't answer, but her eyes shimmered in the passing light. She turned toward the window again, pretending to watch the rain, so he wouldn't see the tears she wiped away with his sleeve. The road narrowed as they turned down a residential block. The neon signs faded behind them, replaced by the quiet rhythm of rain against rooftops. A small wooden sign came into view: Haven Home, a safe place for women and children. The building was modest, painted cream with blue shutters, light glowing warmly through the front windows. Keanu slowed the car and parked at the curb. Lila blinked, confused. "Is this the place?" "Yeah," he said softly. "This is Haven. It's quiet, safe. I help them when I can." She looked out the window at the front door, where a kind-faced woman stood under the awning, waiting. "They know you?" He nodded. "They know enough." She hesitated. "You mean you do this a lot?" "I try to," he said simply. "When I was younger, people helped me in ways I'll never forget. I figure it's my turn now." Lila looked down at her small hands hidden in his sleeves. "Most people don't do that. Most people forget they can," Keanu said. He turned off the engine. The rain had nearly stopped. For a moment, they sat in silence, the kind of silence that feels like a pause before something better begins. Then Keanu said quietly, "Come on, Lila. Let's get you inside." He stepped out first, opening her door and shielding her from the drizzle with his arm as they hurried toward the entrance. The woman at the door smiled warmly when she saw them. Keanu's voice was calm but steady. "This is Lila," he said. "She needs a place to stay tonight." And for the first time in a long while, Lila stepped into a doorway that wasn't an alley or a shelter from the wind. It was a real home waiting for her. The soft glow from the porch light spilled across the entrance of Haven Home as Keanu guided Lila inside. The woman at the front desk looked up from her paperwork, her eyes kind and knowing. She was middle-aged, with silver streaks in her dark hair and a calm presence that instantly put Lila at ease. "Good evening," she said, her tone gentle. "You must be Mr. Reeves. We haven't seen you in a while." Keanu smiled faintly and nodded. "Been on the road. This is Lila. She needs somewhere safe tonight." The woman's expression softened as she crouched slightly to meet Lila's eyes. "Hi there, sweetheart. You can call me Miss Angela. You must be freezing." Lila shifted nervously, still gripping the edges of Keanu's jacket. "I'm okay," she whispered. Angela smiled kindly. "Why don't we get you something dry to wear, Maybe a little hot chocolate too?" Lila hesitated, then nodded shyly. Keanu turned to Angela. "Make sure she eats and gets some rest. I'll cover whatever she needs." Angela gave him a knowing look. "Of course, you never have to ask." He slipped an envelope from his coat pocket and placed it quietly on the counter. It was thick, sealed and unmarked. Angela didn't need to ask what was inside. She'd seen this before. Donations without signatures. He always refused credit. "Thank you," she said softly. Keanu shook his head. "No need to thank me." As Angela led Lila toward a small hallway, the girl turned back, clutching the oversized jacket tightly around her. "Are you leaving?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Not yet," he said gently. "Go get warm first. I'll be right here." Her lips parted in relief. She nodded and followed Angela down the hall, her wet shoes squeaking softly against the polished floor. Keanu watched until she disappeared into one of the side rooms, then exhaled, his shoulders relaxing for the first time all night. The smell of coffee drifted faintly from the kitchen. In the distance, a lullaby played from a small radio near the children's area. He glanced around. The walls were painted soft blue, lined with drawings made by kids who had stayed there before crayon hearts, stick figures holding hands, suns with smiling faces. This place didn't feel like a shelter. It felt like healing. He sat on one of the benches near the reception, staring at the rain sliding down the windows. The sound was steady, rhythmic, almost soothing. For the first time in hours, he felt quiet inside. A few minutes later, Angela returned, holding a folded bundle of clean clothes. Her smile carried both gratitude and understanding. "She's in the washroom changing. Poor thing was soaked through, but she's doing fine. I'll get her something warm to eat next." Keanu nodded, standing. "How many kids do you have tonight?" "More than usual," Angela said softly. "The rain brings them in. Some with their moms, some alone." She paused, her gaze steady. "You've done a good thing tonight, Keanu." He looked down, slipping his hands into his coat pockets. "I just found someone who needed a door open. Anyone would have done the same." Angela gave a gentle smile. "You'd be surprised how many walk right past." He didn't argue. He'd seen too much of that truth already. The quiet cruelty of indifference. Moments later, Lila reappeared, her hair damp but clean, her body wrapped in an oversized sweater and a pair of pajama pants 2 sizes too big. She looked smaller, softer, like a child again, instead of a survivor. When she saw Keanu, her face brightened, and she hurried toward him. "You waited," she said, almost in disbelief. "Of course," he replied, his tone warm. "I told you I would." Angela handed her a mug of hot chocolate topped with tiny marshmallows. Lila held it close, her eyes closing as the first bit of heat reached her hands. She took a sip, and a small hum of happiness escaped her lips. Keanu couldn't help but smile. "Better?" he asked. She nodded quickly. "It's so good. It tastes like Christmas," he chuckled softly. "Then you deserve 2 cups." Angela smiled and walked away, leaving them alone near the small seating area. The room was quiet except for the patter of rain outside and the faint hum of a heater. Lila sat beside him, her bare feet tucked under the chair. "I like it here," she said after a while. "It smells like cookies." "That's because they bake every night," Keanu replied. "Makes the place feel more like home." Lila's eyes sparkled faintly in the dim light. "Do you think my mom would like it here too?" He hesitated for a moment, then said softly, "I think your mom would like anywhere that made you smile." Her voice lowered. "She used to say that when you smile, Lila, the whole world gets brighter." Keanu's chest tightened. "She sounds like someone who loves you very much." "She does," Lila said, her voice wobbling. "She just doesn't know I'm okay yet." He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We'll find a way to tell her, I promise." For the first time in weeks, the word promise didn't feel empty to her. The rain softened to a gentle patter outside, a rhythmic sound against the windows that seemed to calm every heart in the room. Lila's eyelids drooped as she finished her second cup of hot chocolate, the empty mug resting between her small hands. Her shoulders, once tense and hunched, had finally loosened. The weight of the cold night seemed to slip off her little by little. Keanu glanced toward Angela, who was quietly folding towels at the reception counter. She caught his look and nodded toward the hallway. "Room 3 is open," she whispered. "Fresh sheets, extra blankets. She'll be warm there." He turned back to Lila, whose head had begun to tilt against the back of her chair. "Hey," he said softly, leaning closer. "You ready to get some sleep?" Her eyes fluttered open, heavy with exhaustion. "Do I have to go alone?" she asked, her voice trembling just a little. Keanu shook his head. "No, I'll walk you there." She nodded sleepily and reached for his hand without hesitation. Together, they walked down the quiet hallway. The walls were painted with murals, bright rainbows, smiling suns, fields of flowers. Lila traced one of the painted clouds with her finger as they passed. "It's pretty here," she murmured. "It is," Keanu agreed. "People made it that way because they wanted others to feel safe." Angela opened the door to a small, cozy room. A twin bed sat in the corner, layered with soft quilts and a fluffy pillow. A nightstand held a tiny lamp shaped like a moon. The gentle yellow light made the whole room glow with warmth. Lila climbed onto the bed slowly, still wearing Keanu's jacket over her pajamas. She looked around the room as though she couldn't quite believe it was real. "It's so soft," she whispered, pressing her hand against the blanket. "I haven't felt anything this soft in forever." Keanu crouched beside the bed. "Then you'll sleep better than ever tonight." Her eyes lifted to his, uncertain. "You're leaving now, aren't you?" He nodded slightly. "I have to, but I'll be back soon. You have my word." Lila's lip trembled. "People say that, but they don't always mean it." Keanu held her gaze. "I mean it, Lila. You're safe now. You don't have to worry anymore." She hesitated, then leaned forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. The gesture was sudden, pure, full of the gratitude she didn't know how to put into words. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice muffled against his shoulder, "for seeing me." He returned the hug gently, resting his hand on her back. "You don't need to thank me," he said softly. "Just rest. Tomorrow will be better." When she finally let go, he tucked the blanket around her shoulders, making sure his jacket still covered her like an extra layer of protection. She yawned, her small hand clutching the edge of the coat. Angela stepped into the doorway and smiled. "She'll be out in minutes," she whispered. Keanu nodded. "She's earned the rest." He glanced back once more before turning to leave. Lila's eyes were half closed, a faint smile forming as she mumbled, "Good night, Mr. Keanu." "Good night, kid," he said quietly. By the time he reached the front door, the rain had almost stopped. The city beyond was still wet and glimmering, but the storm had passed. He paused on the porch, watching water drip from the roof, and took a deep breath of the clean, rain-soaked air. Behind him, Angela stood holding the envelope he'd left earlier. "You know," she said softly, "most people drop off checks. They don't bring the reason with them." Keanu smiled faintly. "Sometimes you have to see the difference to remember why you started." She nodded, understanding. She'll remember this night for the rest of her life. He looked out toward the quiet street. "So will I." Then, with a final glance back toward the glowing window of room 3, he stepped into the night, his footsteps fading against the wet pavement. Inside, under the warmth of borrowed blankets and kindness, Lila fell asleep to the gentle sound of rain, and for the first time in weeks, her dreams were peaceful. Morning sunlight crept through the thin curtains, painting golden lines across the small room. The air was still, quiet, except for the distant hum of the city waking up. Lila stirred beneath the quilt, blinking against the soft brightness. For a few seconds, she didn't remember where she was. Then the scent of clean sheets and something warm, something that smelled like butter and toast, filled her senses. She sat up slowly. Her hair was tangled, her small hands rubbing her eyes. The red scarf, now clean and folded, rested neatly on the nightstand beside her. Next to it sat a white plate, covered by a napkin to keep the food warm. Lila lifted it carefully. 2 scrambled eggs, a slice of toast, and a small cup of orange juice waited for her. Her stomach growled, but before taking a bite, her gaze caught something else on the table, a folded note, written on simple white paper. Her name, Lila, was written on the outside, in neat handwriting. She unfolded it with careful fingers. Inside, it said, "Eat well and dream big, Kay." That was all. No name, no signature beyond the single letter. But she didn't need more. She knew. Her throat tightened as she read it again, tracing the letter with her fingertip. She whispered softly, "Kay, Keanu." The sound of his name felt like a promise she could hold on to. Lila ate slowly, savoring every bite, not just because she was hungry, but because it felt like more than breakfast. It felt like someone had cared enough to remember her. The eggs were warm, the bread slightly crisp, and the juice sweet enough to make her smile. When she finished, she folded the napkin carefully and set it back down beside the note, as if afraid to disturb the quiet magic of the morning. Through the window, she could see sunlight glittering on puddles left from the night's rain. Children in bright coats were walking to school, holding hands with their parents. She watched them for a long moment, feeling something rise in her chest that she hadn't felt in months: hope. Down the hall, Angela's voice called softly. "You awake, sweetheart?" "Yes," Lila said, her voice still husky from sleep. "It's morning." Angela entered with a gentle smile. "I see you found your breakfast." Lila nodded, clutching the note. "Did he leave this?" Angela glanced at it and nodded. "He did. He came early this morning, before the sun. Said he didn't want to wake you." Lila stared down at the paper again, her eyes glimmering. "He kept his promise." Angela placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "That man keeps all his promises." After breakfast, Lila slipped her small feet into a pair of slippers someone had left by the bed. They were pink and soft, clearly too big, but to her, they felt perfect. She wrapped her red scarf around her neck and tucked the note safely inside it as if it were something sacred. When she stepped into the hallway, the smell of fresh bread and soap lingered in the air. Angela was in the kitchen preparing more meals for the other children. She looked up and smiled when she saw Lila. "Sleep well?" Lila nodded shyly. "Better than ever." "That's what I like to hear," Angela said, turning off the stove. She placed 2 muffins on a napkin and handed them to her. "Here, save one for later." Lila accepted them carefully, her eyes wide. "Thank you." Angela leaned down a little, her voice softer. "You know, he told me to make sure you had a full belly before you start your day." Lila's smile grew. "He really said that?" Angela chuckled. "He really did. Even wrote it down. I think he worries more than most people admit." The girl nodded solemnly. "He's different. When he looks at you, it's like he really sees you." Angela's expression softened. "Yes, he has that gift. Most people see faces. He sees souls." Lila bit into her muffin, the sweetness bringing another smile. "Do you think he'll come back?" Angela placed a hand over her shoulder. "If he said he would, then you can count on it." That seemed to satisfy her. Lila took her breakfast to the common room, where a few other children were drawing and reading. She sat by the window, her scarf glowing red under the sunlight, and opened a coloring book someone had left behind. But she didn't start coloring right away. She unfolded the note again and placed it on her lap. "Eat well and dream big," she whispered to herself, repeating the words over and over until they felt like a song. Across the city, the morning was bright and clear. Keanu stood in the kitchen of his small home studio, pouring himself a cup of coffee. The walls around him were filled with books, film reels, and framed photos from years of work. But this morning, none of it held his attention. His thoughts were still back at Haven Home. He saw the image in his mind again, Lila's small hands clutching his jacket, her tired smile when she finally felt safe, the quiet courage in her eyes. He had seen 1,000 faces throughout his life, but hers had etched itself deep into him. He set the coffee aside and sat at his desk, staring at the blank page of his notebook. There was a scene he had been trying to write for weeks, something for a small project about kindness and redemption, but the words hadn't come. Now, for the first time, they began to take shape. He picked up a pen, but his hand hesitated. He wasn't thinking about scripts or lines anymore. He was thinking about a little girl who had asked for bread, and how that single moment had changed him. Keanu leaned back in his chair, staring at the empty page in front of him. The house was silent, except for the faint ticking of a wall clock. He tapped his pen against the paper, but the words he wanted wouldn't come. Instead, he saw Lila's eyes again. The quiet resilience, the kind of strength that only came from surviving something no child should have to endure. He pushed the notebook aside and stood, pacing slowly across the room. Morning light streamed through the windows, catching on the dust in the air. He'd lived alone for years, comfortable in the rhythm of his solitude. But that morning felt different. There was a pull in his chest, an ache that wouldn't leave him. He had promised Lila she was safe, but something inside him whispered that safety was more than a roof and a meal. It was knowing someone cared enough to stay. He walked over to the piano in the corner and sat down. His fingers brushed the keys, playing a slow, uncertain melody. It was something his mother used to hum when he was young, a song that reminded him of home, of gentleness, of beginnings. The notes hung in the air, soft but full of longing. When he finished, He sat in silence for a moment before whispering to himself, "I should go back." He didn't say it out of obligation. It wasn't guilt, it was instinct. He had seen a spark in that child, a spark that shouldn't fade back into darkness. Within the hour, he was out the door. He dressed simply, pulling on a black hoodie, jeans, and a cap to blend in. He grabbed a brown paper bag from the counter, the smell of fresh bread filling the kitchen. He smiled faintly at the irony of it, how something as ordinary as bread had become a symbol of something sacred. The drive across town was calm, the streets dappled with sunlight reflecting off puddles from the night's rain. He rolled the window down slightly, letting in the cool air. The world looked different in daylight, softer, more forgiving. When he reached Haven Home, he parked across the street, choosing not to draw attention. Children were playing in the small courtyard, chasing one another with laughter that rang through the air. It made him smile. Among them, he spotted a familiar flash of red, Lila's scarf. She was sitting under a small tree, sketching something in a notebook, completely absorbed. Her hair shone in the sunlight, and she looked finally like a child. Keanu exhaled slowly, the tightness in his chest easing. He didn't step out of the car right away. He just watched her for a moment, the way someone might look at a sunrise they hadn't expected to see again. Then he picked up the bag beside him, pushed open the door, and walked toward the gate, ready to keep his promise. Keanu walked up the short path leading to Haven Home with a paper bag in one hand and a small box tucked under his arm. The morning air smelled of wet earth and coffee, the kind of scent that only came after a night of rain. Children's laughter floated from the courtyard, and for a moment, he stopped to listen. It was a sound he hadn't realized he missed the easy joy of kids who finally felt safe. Angela noticed him through the front window and came to the door, wiping her hands on her apron. "Well," she said with a smile, "look who couldn't stay away." Keanu grinned, lowering his cap. "I promised I'd come back." "You did," she said warmly. "And she's been talking about you non-stop since breakfast." He nodded, his eyes softening. "How is she doing?" Angela's expression brightened, like a flower finally getting sunlight. "She's been drawing since dawn. Said she had something she wanted to show you." "That's good," he said quietly. "Drawing helped me once too." Angela raised an eyebrow. "You draw?" He smiled faintly. "Not well, but it kept me grounded when I had nothing else." He handed her the paper bag. "Fresh-baked cookies. I figured the kids could use something sweet." Then he held out the small box. "And this is for her." Angela took it, reading the label. "Colored pencils," she said softly. "She's going to love this." "Where is she?" he asked. "Out back, under the tree. Same place she's been every morning." Keanu thanked her and made his way around the building. The courtyard was bright now, the puddles from the rain glistening in the sunlight. He spotted Lila sitting cross-legged on the grass, her red scarf glowing like a flame against the green. A sketchbook rested in her lap, and her small hand moved quickly, lost in concentration. He stopped a few steps behind her, watching for a moment without saying anything. It reminded him of his younger self, sketching cars and people on napkins when he couldn't afford film school supplies. There was a kind of peace in it, a quiet world that belonged only to the person creating it. Finally, he spoke. "You've been busy." Lila jumped, spinning around. When she saw him, her eyes widened, and her face broke into a smile so bright it made him laugh. "You came back!" "I told you I would," he said, crouching beside her. "And I brought a peace offering." She tilted her head. "What's that?" He placed the box in front of her. "For your art." Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. When she saw the rows of colored pencils, each one sharpened, gleaming like tiny jewels, her breath caught. "These are real ones," she whispered. "Not the small ones that break." "They're yours," he said gently. Her voice quivered with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Keanu." He smiled softly. "Call me Keanu. No Mr. needed." Lila ran her fingers carefully over each pencil, admiring the shades of red, blue, green, and gold. The light in her eyes was almost enough to make Keanu forget how heavy the world could be. She looked up at him and said, "Can I show you something?" He nodded. "Of course." She reached for her sketchbook and flipped through the first few pages. There were simple drawings of flowers, trees, and the shelter itself. Then she stopped on one page and held it open toward him. The lines were rough but full of emotion. A small girl sitting at a restaurant table, her legs dangling above the floor. Across from her sat a man with kind eyes, pushing a plate of bread toward her. Lila bit her lip nervously. "It's us," she said quietly. "That night, when you gave me bread." Keanu stared at the picture for a long time. The details struck him. The way she had drawn the light from the restaurant window, the shape of the bread basket, even the look of warmth in the man's expression. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And somehow, it said everything words couldn't. He swallowed hard, his voice low. "You're very talented, Lila. This is beautiful." Her cheeks flushed. "Do you really think so?" "I know so," he said. "You captured something people spend their whole lives trying to find." "What's that?" she asked, tilting her head. "Kindness," he said softly. "And truth." She smiled, shy but proud, clutching the sketchbook close to her chest. "I thought you'd like it." "I don't just like it," he said, still staring at the drawing. "I think you have a gift, Lila. You see the world in a way that most grown-ups forget to." Her eyes sparkled. "My mom used to tell me that. She said artists see what others miss." "She's right," Keanu said gently, "and she'd be proud of what you've made." Lila's voice grew quieter. "Do you think she'd be proud that I asked for help too?" He met her gaze. "I think that's what she'd be most proud of." She smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I was so scared that night, but you made it feel like it was okay to ask." Keanu placed a hand over hers. "Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is admit we need someone." The moment lingered between them, soft, quiet, filled with understanding. Behind them, the sound of children laughing carried through the courtyard. Keanu glanced toward the building, then back at her. "Tell you what," he said suddenly. "I'm filming something nearby tomorrow. It's not far from here. Would you like to come see how a movie set works?" Her mouth dropped open. "A real movie set?" He nodded. "Real lights, real cameras, the whole thing." "Can I really go?" she whispered, half afraid it wasn't true. "You can," he said with a smile. "If you promise to behave and bring your drawings. I think the crew would love to see them." Lila's face lit up like the morning sun. "I'll be good, I promise," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "I've never been anywhere like that before." Keanu laughed softly, his heart warming at the sound. "Then, it's settled. I'll pick you up in the morning after breakfast. We start early, so make sure you sleep well tonight." She nodded eagerly. "I'll wake up before everyone. I want to see everything, the cameras, the lights, the actors." She paused suddenly, her expression turning thoughtful. "But will they mind me being there?" He shook his head. "Not a chance. They'll be happy to meet you. You'll remind them why stories matter." "Why they matter?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Because stories remind people that hope still exists, even when life doesn't make sense." Lila's eyes softened as she nodded. "Then I want to make stories too. Not just pictures, real stories. Like you. You already are," he said gently. "You just don't know it yet." For a moment, they both sat quietly, the sound of distant laughter and rustling leaves filling the space between them. Angela stood by the doorway, watching, her eyes shining with emotion. She'd seen many children come through Haven Home, some left healed, some lost again. But what she saw now felt different. Lila wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living again. Angela cleared her throat softly, breaking the silence. "We'll make sure she's ready tomorrow," she said, smiling. "But Mr. Reeves, Keanu," he corrected gently. She chuckled. "Keanu, you have no idea what this means to her." He looked down at Lila, who was still tracing the edges of her drawing. "Maybe I do," he said quietly. "Because she's reminded me too." Angela blinked away the tears threatening to fall and nodded. "You're a good man." He shrugged lightly, his tone humble. "Just trying to be the kind of person someone once was for me." When he stood to leave, Lila jumped up too, clutching her sketchbook. "Wait," she said breathlessly. "You can't go yet." He stopped. "Why not?" She tore a page from the back of her book, quickly drawing something with her new colored pencils. Her hand moved fast, a flurry of lines and color. When she was done, she held it out shyly. "It's for you." He took the paper carefully. The drawing showed a tall man and a little girl walking side by side under a single umbrella. The world around them was gray, but the umbrella was red, bright, and full of life. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "It's us," she said softly. "You brought color back to my rain." Keanu's throat tightened. He crouched, meeting her gaze. "Then I'll keep holding that umbrella as long as you need it." She smiled through tears, hugging him tight once more. Angela turned away for a moment, pretending to straighten a picture frame so they wouldn't see her wiping her eyes. When Lila finally let go, Keanu promised, "Tomorrow morning, first thing. I'll be ready," she said with determination. As he walked toward the gate, Angela whispered under her breath, "If the world had more men like that, maybe every child could dream again." The next morning, sunlight poured through the shelter windows, bright and golden. Lila was already awake before the others, sitting on her bed with her red scarf neatly tied and her sketchbook clutched to her chest. Her heart raced with excitement. She could hardly believe she was going to a real movie set. Angela peeked into the room, smiling when she saw her. "Well, someone's up early. I didn't even sleep," Lila admitted with a grin. "What if he forgot?" Angela shook her head. "He doesn't seem like the kind of man who forgets promises." A car horn sounded from outside. Lila ran to the window, her breath fogging the glass. Parked by the curb was a black SUV, sunlight glinting off the windshield. Keanu stepped out, wearing jeans, a gray t-shirt, and his usual calm smile. He waved once, not wanting to draw attention. Angela helped Lila with her jacket and handed her a lunch bag. "Just in case you get hungry." Lila hugged her tightly. "Thank you for everything. Go make memories, sweetheart," Angela said softly. When Lila stepped outside, the cool air hit her cheeks, and her heart thudded in her chest. Keanu opened the car door for her like she was someone important. "Morning," he greeted warmly. "Ready for your big day?" She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I think so." As they drove, Lila pressed her face to the window, staring at the city passing by. Towering buildings, bright murals, people rushing to work. It all looked new, almost magical. "Do you ever get nervous before you do movies?" she asked suddenly. Keanu smiled at the question. "Every single time. Even though you're famous?" He laughed quietly. "Fame doesn't stop nerves. It just teaches you how to breathe through them." She thought about that, her fingers tracing circles on the window. "I breathe funny when I'm nervous, like I can't catch it." "Then we'll practice together," he said. "Slow breath in, slower breath out." Lila mimicked him, closing her eyes as she inhaled and exhaled. When she opened them, she was smiling again. "It works." Keanu nodded. "That's all acting really is, breathing through the hard parts." When they reached the studio lot, she gasped. Massive lights stood like towers, cameras gleamed under white tents, and people in headsets moved quickly between trucks and equipment. The place buzzed with life and focus. "Wow," she whispered. "It's like another world." Keanu smiled as he guided her through the gate. "Welcome to my world." Lila clung to her sketchbook as they walked across the bustling set. Everything around her felt larger than life. Bright lights, cables winding like vines across the floor, people shouting directions she didn't understand. But through all the noise, Keanu's calm voice anchored her. He greeted everyone with quiet nods and a simple, "Good morning." Crew members stopped mid-task when they saw the little girl beside him. A few whispered softly, recognizing her from the story that had quietly spread around the crew since yesterday. Keanu had told no one the details, only that a friend was visiting. But word travels fast when kindness is involved. "Who's that with him?" one camera operator whispered. "A friend," someone replied. "He brought her from a shelter." "Figures," another said softly. "That's so him." Lila didn't notice. She was too busy watching everything how the cameras moved on rails. how the boom microphones hovered above the actors, how the director leaned in toward the monitors with a hand to his chin. Every new thing made her eyes wider. "What's that?" she asked, pointing at a dolly track. "That's what helps the camera move smoothly," Keanu explained. "It's like giving the camera a steady pair of feet." She nodded thoughtfully. "And the people with headsets, are they the bosses?" He chuckled. "Kind of. They make sure everything works, every little piece." "And you're the one who pretends?" He smiled. "That's one way to put it." She giggled softly, clutching her scarf. "Then pretending must be hard." "It can be," he said, looking down at her. "But the trick isn't to pretend. It's to feel something real, even when you're just telling a story." She thought about that for a moment. "So you really feel sad when the story's sad?" He nodded. "Sometimes. Too much." They stopped near the catering tent, where someone handed Keanu a coffee. He waved them off from taking Lila's attention, wanting her to have the full experience without distraction. "Hungry?" he asked. She nodded shyly. "A little." He motioned to one of the tables. "Then let's get you something before we tour the rest." Lila looked around nervously as she sat beside him. Crew members walked by with trays and scripts, giving her friendly smiles. She tucked her knees under the chair and whispered, "Everyone's looking at me." "That's because they're wondering who the brave girl is who stole my morning," Keanu said playfully. Her laughter returned, bright and pure. "I didn't steal it," he smiled softly. "No, you made it better." After breakfast, he led her toward the soundstage. Inside, giant lights illuminated a mock city street. Wooden walls painted to look like brick framed the space. Actors rehearsed quietly in one corner, while technicians adjusted lenses and angles. Lila whispered, "It looks real." "It has to," Keanu said. "But everything in here is pretend. The walls, the lights, even the rain, they're all illusions." She tilted her head. "Then why do people believe it?" "Because they want to," he answered. "People don't come to movies for the truth, they come to remember how truth feels." She stared at him for a moment. "That's beautiful," he smiled. "You've got an artist's heart, Lila. You see things most people miss." She clutched her sketchbook tightly. "I think I want to make stories like this one day." "Then start now," he said gently. "Every story matters, especially yours." Her eyes shimmered as she nodded. "Then I'll make one about you. About the man who shared his bread." He looked away for a moment, humbled. "If you do," he said softly, "make sure you draw the part where you gave half back." She grinned. "Deal." Angela was right. She was blooming. One act of kindness had become the beginning of something bigger, and Keanu could feel it too. In Lila's laughter, in her wonder, in the light she brought to everyone who saw her that day. Something inside him shifted. He hadn't just helped her find hope. She was reminding him why he had believed in it in the first place. The days that followed the visit to the film set unfolded like quiet blessings. For the first time in a long while, Lila had something to look forward to each morning. The world no longer felt as cold or uncertain as it once had. She still missed her mother deeply, but the ache was softer now, wrapped in the warmth of the people around her. Every morning, Angela would wake her with a gentle knock on the door. Breakfast waited downstairs: pancakes, fruit, or sometimes warm oatmeal. And every few days, a familiar envelope would arrive at Haven Home's front desk. There was no return address, but everyone knew where it came from. Inside were small notes, written in neat, thoughtful handwriting, along with gift cards for groceries, art supplies, and sometimes children's books. One note simply read, "For Lila, keep dreaming." Angela kept the note safe, but Lila insisted on taping each one to the wall beside her bed. The words became her reminders that she wasn't invisible anymore. Keanu didn't come by often. He had returned to filming, traveling between sets and interviews. But his quiet acts of care never stopped. His assistant, a kind woman named Rosa, began delivering boxes every few days, sometimes fresh food, sometimes clothing, sometimes sketch pads filled with blank pages waiting for color. Each delivery came with the same request from him: no publicity, No name, just kindness. Angela understood. Keanu had been helping the shelter for years in secret. He never wanted headlines or photographs. What mattered to him wasn't recognition, but results children who could sleep, eat, and dream again. One morning, Rosa brought something new. A stack of children's novels and a small tablet loaded with drawing apps. From him, she said simply, handing it to Angela. He thought she might like these. When Lila opened the box, her eyes filled with tears. He remembered. Angela smiled. He always does. That night, Lila sat at her little desk, sketching on the tablet, tracing bright shapes across the glowing screen. She drew stars, flowers, faces, and scenes from her memory. Every night she drew a little more, her lines more confident, her imagination stretching further. She started drawing her own stories too, tales about kindness, hope, and the small moments that made life beautiful. Sometimes, she would bring her sketches to Angela and whisper, "Do you think Keanu would like this one?" Angela would always smile and say, "I think he'd love it." Weeks passed, and the rhythm of life at Haven Home began to change. There was laughter in the hallways again, drawings covering the walls, and soft piano music drifting from the old speaker Angela kept near the kitchen. Lila had enrolled in a nearby public school with the help of Angela's contacts. She went nervously on her first day, wearing a donated backpack and clutching a pencil case filled with the colored pencils Keanu had given her. The first few mornings were hard. She wasn't used to sitting in a classroom again, surrounded by kids who talked easily about things like sleepovers and birthday parties. At lunch, she sat by herself at first, sketching instead of eating. But children notice kindness when they see it. After a few days, a girl from her class named Zoe sat down beside her and said, "That's a really good drawing. Did you make that?" Lila nodded, startled by the attention. "Yeah, it's for a story I'm making." "What's it about?" "About a man who shares bread," Lila said, smiling softly. From that day forward, she wasn't alone anymore. At the shelter, her confidence grew with every drawing she finished. Angela noticed how the other kids started gathering around Lila in the evenings, watching her sketch pictures of them with big smiles and colorful clothes. Her art became a kind of magic, turning ordinary moments into things worth keeping. One Friday afternoon, a delivery truck pulled up outside Haven Home. Rosa stepped out, smiling as she carried 2 large boxes. Angela met her at the door. "You never stop surprising us," she said. Rosa chuckled. "Don't thank me, it's all him." Angela opened the boxes. Inside were neatly wrapped packages of school supplies, new notebooks, pens, paints, and sketch pads for every child. At the bottom of the box was a single white envelope. Angela opened it, expecting another quiet message, and found a note written in Keanu's handwriting. "For the artists of tomorrow, keep creating light." That night, Angela gave Lila the note. The girl stared at the words for a long time before whispering, "He really believes in us." Angela nodded. "He believes in everyone. That's what makes him who he is." Across town, Keanu sat in his trailer after filming Wrapped for the day. The set had gone quiet, the hum of the cameras replaced by the steady rain outside. He sipped from a mug of tea and looked down at a photo Rosa had sent him earlier. A picture of Lila, surrounded by other children, all holding sketch pads. Their faces were bright, their smiles wide. He exhaled slowly, feeling something stir deep in his chest. Fame had always been strange to him. The noise, the interviews, the red carpets, it all felt far away from what mattered. But this was real. He thought of his mother's voice again, soft and unwavering, reminding him that true success wasn't measured by applause, but by the lives you quietly touch. She used to say, "If your kindness echoes farther than your name, then you've done enough." Keanu leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. He didn't need anyone to know about the girl at the restaurant, or the sketches she made, or the notes he left at the shelter. Those were his quiet truths, the kind that didn't need a stage. He smiled faintly, setting the photo beside his script. Tomorrow, he had another early shoot. But tonight, as rain tapped gently against the window, he felt at peace, knowing, somewhere across the city, a little girl was drawing a brighter world, one he'd only helped her rediscover. It was a quiet Wednesday morning when the letter arrived. Angela found it in the small metal mailbox outside Haven Home, tucked between two flyers. The envelope was creased and rain-stained, the name Lila Flores written in shaky penmanship. There was no return address, only a faint hospital emblem stamped in blue ink. Angela brought it inside, wiping it dry with a towel. She recognized the handwriting style, immediately formal, medical. Her heart sank as she called softly, "Lila, sweetheart? You've got mail." Lila was in the art room, sketching with the other children. She looked up, surprised. "Mail? For me?" Angela nodded and handed it over carefully. "It's from County General Hospital." The color drained from Lila's face. She turned the envelope in her hands as if afraid it might disappear. For a long moment, she didn't open it. Then, with trembling fingers, she tore along the edge. The letter was short, typed neatly on hospital letterhead. Her lips moved as she read it silently. Then she stopped breathing for a second. "She's alive," she whispered. Her voice broke on the word. "My mom's alive." The entire room froze. Angela's hands went to her mouth. "Oh my God," she murmured softly. "Let me see." Lila handed her the paper. The letter explained that a woman named Maria Flores had been admitted months ago under emergency care after collapsing in the street. Without family contact information, she had been listed as unidentified. But during a recent review, a social worker discovered Lila's name on an old note found in her mother's bag. The hospital wanted to inform her that her mother was still alive, but in critical condition due to complications from pneumonia and malnutrition. Lila pressed her hand to her chest. "She's alive," she repeated, tears welling in her eyes. "I have to go to her. She needs me." Angela placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Wait, sweetheart. We need to call someone first. You can't go alone." But Lila was already shaking her head. "I know how to get there. I've seen the sign before, when we drove with the volunteers. It's not far." Before Angela could stop her, Lila slipped the letter into her pocket, grabbed her red scarf, and ran out into the drizzle. Her small figure disappeared down the block, her hair bouncing behind her as she turned the corner. Angela's voice caught in her throat. "Lila!" She ran to the door, but by the time she reached the street, the girl was gone. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone. There was only one person she knew to call. Angela's hands shook as she scrolled through her contacts and pressed Keanu's number. The line rang twice before his calm voice answered. "Angela? Everything okay?" She exhaled shakily. "Keanu, it's Lila. A letter came this morning from County General. Her mother's alive, but she's in critical condition." Lila read it and ran out before I could stop her. She said she was going to the hospital. There was a long pause on the other end. When Keanu spoke again, his voice was steady but filled with concern. "How long ago did she leave? 10, maybe 15 minutes. It's raining again. She doesn't have a coat." "I'm on my way," he said, already grabbing his keys. "Text me the hospital address. I'll get there before she does." Angela could hear the engine start before the call ended. She stood at the doorway, heart pounding, praying silently that the city wouldn't swallow the little girl before help could reach her. Across town, Keanu drove fast but careful, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. The windshield wipers kept rhythm with his thoughts sharp, urgent, unrelenting. He'd seen too many nights like this in movies. Rain-slicked streets, lost children, desperate hope. But this wasn't a script. This was real. He could still hear Lila's voice in his mind from that day on set. "You really think stories can change people?" she'd asked. And he had said yes because he believed it. But now, he realized, some stories weren't meant to be told. They were meant to be lived. He turned onto 5th Avenue, where the city thinned near the hospital district. Ambulances passed him with flashing lights, their sirens echoing against the wet pavement. He pulled up near County General and parked by the emergency entrance. The rain had picked up again, steady and cold. Inside the hospital lobby, the air was thick with antiseptic and the low hum of fluorescent lights. He approached the front desk. "Excuse me," he said quickly. A little girl 8 years old, brown hair, red scarf. She might have just come in looking for her mother, Maria Flores. The nurse at the counter looked startled. "She arrived not long ago," she said. "We found her crying by the elevator. She's with one of the social workers now." "Where?" "Second floor, room 214. That's where the patient Maria Flores is being treated." Keanu nodded his thanks and took the stairs 2 at a time. His wet shoes squeaked on the linoleum. As he rounded the corner of the second floor, he spotted her, a small figure sitting outside a half-open door, knees pulled to her chest, scarf soaked through. "Lila?" he said softly. Her head snapped up, eyes red and wide. "I didn't want to wait," she whispered. "She's in there, Keanu. She's really there." He crouched beside her, brushing wet hair from her face. "I know," he said gently. "You did the brave thing coming here, but you don't have to do this alone anymore." Lila's voice cracked. "She's so pale. They said she's sleeping, but she's not waking up." He placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll wait together." For the first time since running away, she exhaled. She leaned into him, trembling, and whispered, "You came." "I told you I would," he said softly. "And I always will." Together they turned toward the hospital room, where the faint beeping of machines echoed like fragile heartbeats in the quiet hall. The room was dimly lit, the only sound coming from the slow, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. A faint smell of antiseptic filled the air. Lila sat beside the hospital bed, her small hand wrapped tightly around her mother's. Maria Flores looked fragile, her face pale, her hair thin, her chest rising and falling beneath a blanket that seemed too heavy for her frail frame. But she was breathing. Keanu stood quietly in the doorway, watching. He didn't want to interrupt the moment. Lila's voice was soft, trembling as she whispered, "Mama, it's me. I'm here now." She smoothed her mother's hand gently, afraid to let go, afraid she might wake up and find it had all been a dream. After a few moments, Keanu stepped closer. Lila turned, her eyes still glistening with tears. "She's alive," she said, her voice full of awe and fear all at once. "They said she just needs time, but she's really here." He nodded slowly. "She's a fighter," he said softly. "You both are." Lila wiped her cheeks, her little voice trembling. "She looks so tired." "She's been through a lot," Keanu said, "but she's still holding on, and that means there's hope." He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. The steady warmth of his presence helped calm the shaking in her hands. Together, they sat beside the bed in silence, listening to the slow, fragile rhythm of life returning to the woman who had once been Lila's whole world. After a few minutes, a doctor entered quietly, clipboard in hand. He looked surprised to see Keanu Reeves in the room, but kept his composure. "You're with the patient?" he asked gently. Keanu nodded. "Yes, she's family to me." The doctor smiled faintly, clearly understanding. "Maria's condition is serious, but she's stable now. She'll need good nutrition, consistent care, and a safe place to recover. That's the key to getting her strength back." Lila clutched her mother's hand tighter, afraid of, what those words might mean. "Will she wake up soon?" "With rest," the doctor said kindly. "And a bit of luck, yes. Her body's been through too much, but she's fighting." Keanu nodded. "Do whatever she needs," he said quietly. "No limits on treatment, no delays." The doctor looked at him curiously. "We'll do everything possible, Mr. Reeves." Keanu's tone was steady. "No, I mean at every cost, every medication, every specialist. Handle it through my foundation. I don't want her or the girl to see another bill." The doctor blinked, then nodded with deep respect. "Understood." He hesitated a moment longer, then said softly, "She's lucky to have someone like you." Keanu glanced at Lila, then back at the doctor. "No," he said. "She's lucky to have a daughter who never gave up on her." The doctor smiled and left them alone again. Lila turned to Keanu, tears welling again, though this time they were tears of relief. "You really think she'll be okay?" He smiled faintly. I think your mom's stronger than anyone gives her credit for. I'm just here to help her prove it." Lila sat by her mother's bedside long after the doctor left. The monitors beeped steadily, soft and rhythmic like a fragile lullaby. Her tiny fingers traced the outline of her mother's hand, memorizing the feel of every wrinkle, every freckle. She whispered stories between the pauses, stories about the shelter, about Angela, about the day she met Keanu. "She helped me when I was scared, Mama," she said quietly. "He helped me too. He gave me bread when I was hungry. He made me laugh again. And now you're here." Her voice trembled, but her eyes glowed with a fragile hope. Keanu sat nearby in the corner, not wanting to intrude. The room felt sacred, the kind of place where words had to be chosen carefully. When Lila grew quiet, he stood and moved closer. He crouched beside her, his voice low and warm. "You know," he said, gently, "when I was a kid, I used to sit beside my mom like this too. She worked hard, sometimes too hard, and I'd just hold her hand. I thought if I didn't let go, she'd stay strong forever." Lila looked up at him. "Did she get better?" He smiled faintly. "She did. Not right away, but she did. And yours will too. You'll see." The door opened, and the nurse stepped in to check Maria's vitals. "Her numbers are improving," she said softly, adjusting the IV. "It'll take time, but she's holding steady. She's got a reason to fight now." Keanu nodded, relief flickering across his features. "Thank you," he said sincerely. When the nurse left, he turned to Lila. "You hear that? She's fighting, just like you did." Lila blinked through her tears. "I didn't fight. I was just hungry." He smiled, shaking his head. "You fought every day. You didn't give up. That's what fighters do. They keep going, even when it hurts." She hesitated before asking, "Then what are you?" He thought for a moment, then said softly, "I'm just the backup." "The backup?" she repeated, confused. "Yeah," he said with a small grin. "Every fighter needs someone in their corner, someone who believes in them. That's my job for both of you." Lila leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Then we're lucky you showed up." He looked at the sleeping woman on the bed and nodded slowly. "No, I'm the lucky one." The hours slipped by quietly. A few times, Maria stirred, her hand twitching slightly in Lila's grasp. Every small movement made the girl gasp with hope. Keanu stayed with them, stepping out only when the nurses needed space. Later that night, he signed the final hospital forms, arranging for Maria's treatment to continue indefinitely. He made sure the costs were covered through his foundation, leaving no name, no signature, just the quiet assurance that they wouldn't have to struggle again. When he returned to the room, he found Lila fast asleep with her mother's hand still in hers. He gently adjusted the blanket over her small shoulders and whispered, "You did good, kid." For the first time that night, Maria's fingers tightened faintly around her daughter's hand. It was the smallest motion, but it was enough. The weeks that followed were slow, but filled with quiet miracles. Every morning brought a new sign of strength. Maria's color returned little by little, her cheeks no longer pale but softly flushed with life. Her voice, once faint and broken, grew steadier each day. The doctors were astonished at how quickly she was regaining strength. They said it was rare, almost impossible, for someone so weak to recover so completely. But Maria had something most patients didn't, a reason to keep living. Each afternoon, Lila sat by her side, reading from storybooks or drawing pictures of flowers, hospitals, and skies full of light. When Maria could finally sit up, she smiled weakly and whispered, "You've been taking care of me, haven't you?" Lila nodded, eyes shimmering. "You took care of me first. Now it's my turn." The bond between them deepened again, woven from pain, patience, and hope. Angela visited often, bringing home-cooked meals and warm blankets from the shelter. The nurses adored Lila, calling her the little guardian angel of room 214. And every few nights, when the hospital corridors grew quiet and the city lights flickered through the blinds, Keanu would slip through the side entrance. He always came late, long after visiting hours. wearing a simple hoodie and a cap pulled low. He never stayed long, just enough to check on them, to see for himself that Maria was healing. That evening, as he entered the room, Lila looked up from her sketchbook and broke into a smile. "You came." He smiled faintly. "I said I would." Maria stirred in her bed, her voice tired but kind. "Mr. Reeves, I don't know how to. Thank you. The doctors told me about the bills, everything you've done." Keanu shook his head. "Please, don't. You just focus on getting better." Her eyes softened. "You didn't have to help us. You're a busy man." He looked down, almost embarrassed. "Maybe, but some things matter more than busy schedules." Lila chimed in, showing him a page from her sketchbook. It was a drawing of all three of them. Her mother sitting up in bed, Keanu at her side, and Lila holding a pencil. "See, we're a team now." He smiled warmly. "That's the best picture I've seen all week." Maria chuckled weakly. "She hasn't stopped drawing since you gave her those pencils." Keanu looked at Lila, his tone soft but serious. "Keep it up. You've got real talent, Lila. One day those drawings will speak for you in ways words never can." Lila's eyes shone with pride. "Do you really think I could be an artist?" He nodded. "I don't think it, I know it." Lila sat up straighter, her excitement bubbling through her voice. "Then I'll draw every day until I'm as good as the people who make movie posters." Keanu chuckled softly. "Movie posters, huh? That's a pretty good goal. Maybe one day I'll get lucky enough to have one of yours hanging outside a theater." Maria smiled at that, her eyes full of quiet gratitude. "You've given her something I couldn't hope." Keanu shook his head gently. "No, ma'am. You gave her that. You're the reason she kept believing long enough for me to show up." The room fell silent for a moment. The kind of silence that wasn't empty, but peaceful, filled with everything words couldn't say. Outside the window, the night lights of Los Angeles shimmered faintly through the mist. The sound of a distant ambulance faded as the city settled into its rhythm. Keanu pulled a chair closer to the bed. "You know," he said, his tone thoughtful, "when I was young, my mom used to tell me something I never really understood until much later. She said the only thing that lasts longer than pain is kindness." Lila tilted her head. What did she mean? He looked down at her, a gentle smile forming. "Pain fades, even when it feels endless. But when someone shows you kindness, it stays. It changes you. Sometimes, it saves you." Lila nodded slowly, her small voice trembling. "Like when you gave me bread." His eyes softened. "Exactly like that." Maria reached for her daughter's hand and squeezed it weakly. "And when you shared it instead of eating it alone," she said with a faint smile. "That's the part that matters." Keanu met her gaze and nodded quietly. "That's the part that changed me, too." They talked for a while longer, mostly about simple things. Lila's drawings, Maria's favorite songs, the smell of fresh bread that seemed to follow their story wherever it went. Before leaving, Keanu handed Lila a small envelope. "This is for later," he said. "What is it?" she asked curiously. He smiled. "Something to look forward to." When he was gone, Lila opened it carefully. Inside was a folded brochure from an art school downtown with a handwritten note, "For when you're ready to learn from the best." Her mouth fell open, eyes wide. "He wants me to go here," she whispered. Maria smiled through tears. "Then we'll make sure you do." Over the following weeks, Keanu kept his promise. He continued to visit after filming, always quietly, always humbly. He and Lila would sit side by side at the foot of Maria's bed, sketching scenes from their imagination: mountains, starlit skies, people helping one another in small but meaningful ways. Sometimes, Maria would join in, her shaky hands drawing outlines that Lila later colored in. Every sketch told a story, and every story was another step toward healing. One night, after Lila had fallen asleep in the chair beside her mother's bed, Keanu stood at the window, looking out over the glowing city. Maria watched him for a long moment before speaking softly. "You've done more for us than you realize." He shook his head. "You've both done more for me than you know." She smiled weakly. "How so?" He turned slightly, his voice low and thoughtful. Because you reminded me what matters. All the noise, fame, money, attention, it fades. But kindness, that's the only legacy that lasts. He adjusted the blanket over Lila's shoulders and looked back at Maria. Your daughter taught me that. Maria's eyes glistened as she whispered, Then maybe you were both meant to find each other. Keanu smiled faintly. Yeah, he said. Maybe we were. 2 months later, the air outside County General was warm again, washed clean by spring rain. Lila stood on the front steps with her mother, watching the sunlight spill across the city. Maria's steps were still careful, her strength not fully returned, but she was walking on her own. Lila held her hand tightly, her red scarf fluttering in the wind. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and Keanu stepped out with that same calm smile they'd come to recognize. Good morning, he said. You two look ready for a new chapter. Maria smiled faintly. We're nervous, but ready. That's the best way to start anything, he said warmly. Come on, I want to show you something. The drive took them through the quieter side of Los Angeles streets, lined with trees and cafes, neighborhoods filled with murals and laughter. Finally, they stopped in front of a small apartment building painted pale yellow, with flower boxes hanging from the windows. Maria looked at him in disbelief. You didn't? He nodded toward the building. Top floor, corner unit. 2 bedrooms, furnished, covered for as long as you need. It's under the Hope Line Fund, just one of the charities we support. Her eyes filled with tears. You've already done so much for us, Keanu. He shook his head. This isn't charity. It's a restart. You've both earned it. Lila looked up at him, wide-eyed. We get to live here? He smiled and knelt to her level. You get to build from here. Big difference. The landlord, an older woman with kind eyes, appeared with a set of keys. Welcome home, ladies, she said warmly. Everything's ready inside. When they stepped in, Lila gasped. Sunlight poured through wide windows onto freshly painted walls. The living room had a small couch, a wooden table, and a vase of white lilies on the counter. A new art set sat neatly stacked near the corner, waiting for her. Maria pressed a hand to her mouth. It's beautiful. Lila twirled in the center of the room, laughing. It smells like paint and cookies. Keanu chuckled softly. That's what a new start smells like. He handed Maria a small envelope. There's something else I want to show you, just down the block. But for now, you can settle in. It's a quiet area, lots of good people nearby. Maria nodded, tears still shining. I don't know how to thank you. You already have, he said quietly. You're still standing. Later that afternoon, Keanu returned and offered to take them on a short walk. The weather was gentle, the sun warm but not harsh, and the sidewalks smelled faintly of jasmine from nearby gardens. Lila skipped a few steps ahead, her red scarf trailing behind like a banner of joy. At the end of the block stood a small brick building with large windows and colorful murals painted on the walls, hands reaching toward a sky filled with stars and brushes blooming into flowers. Above the door was a sign that read, The Bright Horizon Art Studio. Lila stopped in front of it, reading aloud. Is this for me? Keanu smiled. For both of you, but I think you'll like it most. Inside, the air smelled of paper, acrylic paint, and coffee. Canvases leaned against the walls, and a few people were working quietly at easels. The studio director, a middle-aged woman with silver hair and bright blue glasses, came forward with a welcoming smile. You must be Lila, she said warmly. And this is your mom? Maria nodded, shy but smiling. Yes, I'm Maria. Thank you for having us. The woman turned to Keanu. You weren't exaggerating. I've heard all about her talent. Lila's cheeks flushed. You did? He nodded. I may have shown her a few of your drawings. The director crouched to Lila's height. They're beautiful. You've got a gift, young lady. Would you like to try painting here? Lila's eyes widened. You mean, right now? If you want to, the woman said. Lila looked to her mother, who nodded with encouragement. Go on, sweetheart. She took a seat at an empty easel. A volunteer handed her a palette, brushes, and a small jar of water. For a few seconds, she just stared at the blank canvas, her hands trembling slightly. Then she took a deep breath, picked up the brush, and began to paint. The room fell silent, except for the soft scrape of bristles on canvas. Her strokes were quick but gentle, her small hands steady as she worked. Slowly, an image began to form, a woman and a little girl standing beneath an umbrella in the rain. Above them, the sky glowed with light. Maria pressed a hand to her heart, whispering, "That's us." Keanu stood near the door, his cap pulled low, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. He watched as the other artists in the room stopped what they were doing, drawn by the child's focus and emotion. When she stepped back, her face was flushed with pride. The director studied the painting, speechless for a moment. "Lila," she said finally, "how would you like to join our children's art program? We have a scholarship fund, and I think you'd be perfect for it." Lila blinked in disbelief. "A scholarship? Like a real one?" The woman smiled. "Like a real one. Full tuition, supplies, mentorship, the works. You deserve the chance to grow." Maria's voice trembled. That's incredible." Keanu stepped forward, his tone gentle. "You earned it, Lila. Remember what we said. Every story matters, especially yours." Lila's eyes shone with tears. "I won't waste it, I promise." The director nodded, moved by the moment. "We'll start next week." "And you," she said, turning to Maria, "should come too. We run workshops for parents, art therapy, creative writing, community projects. It's all about healing through creation." Maria smiled through tears. "I'd like that very much." As they left the studio, the sun dipped low, casting warm light across the sidewalk. Lila carried her wet canvas carefully in both hands. Keanu held the door for them, lingering just long enough to watch her step into the light, her face glowing with new confidence. From where he stood, she looked like every reason kindness was worth it, proof that one act could ripple through countless lives. He smiled quietly, knowing she didn't need saving anymore. She was already writing her own story, and as the door closed behind them, the paint on her canvas shimmered beneath the sunlight. Two figures beneath an umbrella, standing in the rain, together and unbroken. 6 months passed, and Los Angeles began to glow with early summer light. The city had changed for Lila and Maria. Their apartment had become a home filled with color and laughter, the walls covered in drawings, each one a piece of their journey. Every morning, Lila carried her sketchbook to the Bright Horizon Art Studio, where she painted beside other students who had come to see her not as a girl from a shelter, but as a true artist. The director often stood behind her in quiet awe, watching how the little girl transformed simple moments into something that felt alive. Lila's strokes were filled with emotion, hope, gratitude, and the kind of perspective that only a survivor could paint. By early July, the studio decided to host a small community art exhibit featuring the works of its young artists. The theme was "What Kindness Means." Each student would display one piece that captured their understanding of compassion. Lila knew immediately what hers would be. She stayed late at the studio night after night, working under the soft hum of the lamps while Maria waited nearby. She sketched and painted the same scene she had drawn months ago, the one that started it all. A little girl, ragged and hungry, standing in a glowing restaurant. A man seated at the table, offering her bread with a gentle smile. She titled it "The Man Who Shared His Bread." On the day of the exhibit, the gallery filled with families, artists, and neighbors. Children ran through the aisles, pointing at bright canvases and paper collages. Maria stood near the back of the room, her heart swelling with pride as she watched Lila stand beside her painting. People paused as they passed it. Some whispered, some smiled, others simply stood in silence, taking in the emotion it carried. There was something in the way the light touched the figures, something that spoke of hunger and hope at once. Lila had written a small inscription beneath the title card in her careful handwriting. "Kindness fed more than my hunger." The words struck everyone who read them. There were tears, quiet smiles, and nods of understanding from strangers who had never met her but somehow felt they knew her story. That evening, When the crowd began to thin, Lila looked at her mother. "Do you think he'll come?" Maria smiled gently. "You know him. If he can, he will. And even if he doesn't, he's already here right there." She pointed to the painted figure in the frame. Lila looked at the man in the picture and smiled softly. "I guess you're right." Long after the exhibit closed and the last families had gone home, the gallery lights dimmed to a warm amber glow. The air was quiet now, filled only with the faint hum of the city beyond the glass doors. A security guard turned the key in the lock and nodded politely to a tall man waiting outside. Keanu stepped through the entrance, dressed simply as always black jacket, worn jeans, a baseball cap pulled low. He moved quietly through the still gallery, the soft sound of his boots echoing across the floor. He didn't want attention. He didn't need applause. He just wanted to see it. He walked past bright splashes of color, past children's paintings of animals, of families, of smiling suns. Then he saw it. Hanging on the far wall, framed in simple oak, was Lila's piece, The Man Who Shared His Bread. He stopped a few feet away. The sight of it made him inhale sharply. The painting was small, but it felt alive. The warm glow from the restaurant window spilled out into the street, lighting the little girl's face as she reached for the bread. The man, drawn with familiar features, though softened with childlike simplicity, was captured mid-motion, his expression gentle, calm, and kind. Keanu stepped closer, studying the brushstrokes. Each one seemed to carry a memory, the rain, the hunger in her eyes, the silence that had filled the restaurant that night. But what struck him most was how she had painted herself not as helpless, but as brave, standing tall in the moment that changed her life. His eyes dropped to the inscription beneath the frame. The handwriting was careful but firm. "Kindness fed more than my hunger." The words hit him like a wave. He felt the air leave his chest as his throat tightened. He blinked slowly, trying to keep the emotion steady, but it broke through anyway. His hand rose instinctively, brushing the edge of the frame as if to remind himself it was real. For a long time he stood there in silence. The gallery was empty, but in that quiet space, he could almost hear her laughter again, the little giggle when she first sat at his table, the way her voice had trembled when she said, "You came." He smiled faintly through the tears that filled his eyes. "You did it, kid," he whispered under his breath. "You really did it." He didn't leave right away. Instead, he sat on the small bench across from the painting. The city's lights reflected faintly on the glass above it, like stars caught inside the frame. He thought about how far she had come from the rainy streets to this glowing room, from surviving to creating. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the note he had written that first morning at the shelter. "Eat well and dream big, Kay." The edges were worn now, the ink slightly faded, but the message was the same. He unfolded it, looked at it for a long moment, then placed it gently on the bench before standing. "Dream big," he whispered again, as if speaking to the painting itself. Then he turned toward the door, glancing back one last time. Under the soft light, the two figures on the canvas seemed alive, the man and the child, frozen in that single act of kindness that had rippled across both their lives. Keanu smiled quietly, tears glistening in his eyes. "Thank you for reminding me," he murmured. "Kindness is the only story worth telling." And with that, he stepped out into the night. It began quietly, the way most things do. The exhibit at the community gallery had ended, but one visitor, an art journalist named Caroline Marsh, couldn't stop thinking about the painting titled "The Man Who Shared His Bread." The image stayed with her long after she left, haunting her in the best possible way. There was something about the sincerity of it, the way it captured compassion without glamour. She decided to find out who the little girl behind the painting was. A few days later, Caroline met with the Bright Horizon Art Studio's director, who told her about Lila, how she'd come from hardship, how she'd rebuilt her life, and how the man in the painting had once shared his dinner with her during the darkest night of her life. The story was too moving to ignore. Caroline asked for permission to write about it. Maria hesitated at first, not wanting attention, but Keanu had always taught Lila that stories of kindness were meant to be shared. So, after careful thought, Maria agreed, as long as the piece focused on hope, not pity. When the article was published, it spread faster than anyone expected. The title read, "The Man Who Shared His Bread: How a Small Act of Kindness Changed a Child's Life." It didn't name Keanu Reeves directly, but the clues were there. The description of the night, the Hollywood actor dining alone, the little girl who asked for bread. Readers pieced the story together quickly. By morning, social media was flooded with the painting's image. Thousands of people shared it, calling it a reminder of what humanity still could be. Hashtags like #SharedBread and #KindnessLives trended for days. People began leaving comments from every corner of the world. This made me cry in the best way. We need more stories like this. Kindness is contagious. Donations started pouring into children's shelters, art programs, and food charities. Many sent funds specifically to the Bright Horizon Art Studio, writing messages like, "For Lila, who reminded us all what hope looks like." Maria and Lila were overwhelmed. Angela called them one evening just to say that Haven Home had received more donations in 1 week than it usually did in a year. "It's like a wave of goodness just swept through the world," she said tearfully. And it all started with that one painting. Keanu, of course, stayed silent. He didn't confirm or deny anything. He ignored the headlines and the press inquiries. But those who knew him weren't surprised. He had never done any of it for recognition. Still, even he couldn't escape the quiet sense of awe at how far the moment had traveled. One night, sitting in his small studio, he scrolled through the countless posts and videos made by strangers, children holding up pieces of bread, families drawing pictures of kindness, teachers telling their students about the story that had gone viral. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, whispering softly, "All that from one little girl." Days turned into weeks, and the story refused to fade. News outlets continued to share updates about the growing wave of donations. Nonprofits across the country reported record-breaking support, especially those dedicated to helping homeless families and children's art programs. Schools began hosting shared bread days, encouraging students to bring extra lunches for those who might not have one. In downtown Los Angeles, a mural appeared almost overnight, a massive painting of 2 figures under a red umbrella. The artist had written a single line beneath it, "Kindness fed more than my hunger." Thousands of people stopped to take photos, leaving candles, notes, and flowers at its base. Lila and her mother visited the mural one sunny afternoon. Lila stared up at the wall, holding Maria's hand. "It feels like the world is painting with me," she said softly. Maria nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "You reminded them how beautiful kindness can be." They didn't see the man standing at a distance, wearing a baseball cap and dark sunglasses. Keanu watched quietly from across the street, blending into the crowd as he always did. He smiled faintly when he saw Lila point to the painted umbrella, her red scarf blowing in the wind. He didn't need her to see him. Just knowing she was happy was enough. That night, back at his home, Keanu sat by the window overlooking the city. The lights of Los Angeles stretched endlessly, like a living constellation. He thought about how strange it all was that a single act of kindness, one loaf of bread, could ripple so far beyond what anyone imagined. He had done many films in his life, some with explosions, some with epic lines that people quoted for years, but none of them had ever felt as powerful as this quiet moment. This wasn't a scene. It wasn't scripted. It was real. He picked up his journal, the one he rarely showed anyone, and began to write. His handwriting was small but steady. "We chase big dreams, big wins, big fame. But maybe the greatest thing we can ever do is be kind when no one's watching. Because kindness, when it's real, leaves an echo that never dies." He paused, rereading the words, then set the pen down. The city outside seemed quieter now, as if listening. His phone buzzed with a message from Angela. It was a photo Lila at her art studio, surrounded by smiling children, teaching them how to draw rain and umbrellas. Beneath the image she had written, "She's paying it forward already." Keanu smiled, a deep warmth spreading through him. He closed his eyes and whispered, "That's how it's supposed to be." Outside, the wind carried faint laughter from a nearby park. The night felt lighter somehow, filled with the hum of something invisible, but strong, the echo of grace, spreading from one heart to another. And as Keanu looked out into the vast glowing city, he realized that maybe the truest legacy any of them could leave behind wasn't in fame or fortune, but in the quiet moments when someone chose compassion over indifference. A child had reminded him of that truth, and because of her, the world remembered too. The morning sun was soft and golden as it stretched across the quiet park. The trees rustled gently, their leaves whispering secrets to the breeze. Keanu sat on a weathered wooden bench near the fountain, dressed simply in a gray sweater and jeans, a small paper bag of bread resting beside him. He tore off a piece and tossed it gently onto the path. A few pigeons fluttered down, pecking eagerly at the crumbs. It was peaceful here. No cameras, no crowd, no scripts, just the sound of wings and water, the kind of silence that lets a man breathe. He leaned back against the bench, eyes half closed, thinking about how much had changed and how little it really took to make that change. A child's hunger, a shared loaf of bread, a moment of compassion. That was all it took to start a ripple that spread across the world. In his mind, he could still see her, the little girl standing in the rain, clutching her mother's red scarf. He remembered the way she hesitated before reaching for the bread, the way her voice shook when she said thank you, the way her art had brought strangers together. He smiled faintly, whispering to himself, sometimes it's not fame that feeds the soul, but a single act of seeing someone who feels invisible. A family passed by a father, a mother, and their young daughter, maybe 7 or 8, laughing as she chased the pigeons away. Her giggles filled the air, light and free. Keanu couldn't help but smile wider. There was something about the laughter of children that made everything right in the world again. The little girl paused for a moment and looked at him curiously. "Are you feeding them?" she asked. He nodded, holding out the bag. "Want to help?" She grinned and sat beside him, reaching for a piece. Together, they tossed the crumbs, watching the birds swarm and scatter in small bursts of wings and light. The father smiled from a few steps away, grateful for the simple kindness. When the bag was empty, the girl handed it back and said, "They like you." He laughed softly. "I think they just like the bread." She tilted her head. "Maybe, but you gave it to them." Her words hung in the air for a moment, gentle and true. He looked at her, a quiet recognition passing between them. "And that's enough." The girl waved before running back to her parents. Keanu watched her go, her laughter echoing across the park like a memory he never wanted to forget. He sat there a little longer, letting the warmth of the sun rest on his face. Somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed, and the breeze carried the faint scent of fresh bread from a nearby bakery. Life, simple and full, kept moving. Keanu stayed on the bench long after the family had left. The park slowly emptied as morning became afternoon, yet he didn't move. There was a quiet satisfaction in just existing among ordinary people, without being recognized, without anyone asking for anything. It was the anonymity. He loved the peace of simply being human. A man passed by, walking his dog, and smiled in recognition, but didn't stop him. Just a nod of respect. The kind that said, "I know who you are, but I'll let you be." Keanu nodded back, grateful. He thought about how easy it would have been to ignore that night at the restaurant, to look away, like everyone else had. He thought of the waiter's hesitation, the whispers, the way the world so often builds walls around compassion. But that night, a little girl's courage had broken through it all. A whisper had changed everything. He took another piece of bread from the bag and tossed it toward a pigeon that lingered near his feet. "You know," he murmured softly, "we don't realize how small actions become big stories until much later." The pigeon tilted its head, as if listening. He chuckled under his breath. He remembered what Lila had told him after her first art class. "When I draw, it feels like I'm putting love back into the world." That single line had stayed with him. Maybe that's what kindness really was, not just a moment, but something that kept renewing itself long after the act was done. The sky shifted into gold, and the light danced on the fountain's surface. Keanu stood, brushing crumbs from his hands. He looked around at the people passing by, strangers hurrying to work, parents carrying children, couples laughing under the trees. Every face told a story. Some tired, some hopeful, all human. He whispered, "Every story matters." He began to walk down the park path, his pace unhurried, his thoughts calm. The world would keep spinning. Movies would come and go. Fame would fade. But the memory of one child's bravery, one night of shared bread, would always stay. Because what he'd learned that evening wasn't about wealth or fame. It was about the courage it takes to be kind in a world that forgets to look up. At the park's edge, he stopped to buy a cup of coffee from a vendor. The man recognized him and froze, unsure how to react. Keanu smiled kindly and said, "Don't worry, I just need some caffeine." The man laughed nervously and handed him the cup. As Keanu paid, he dropped an extra bill into the tip jar. "For the next customer," he said. The vendor blinked in surprise, then nodded. "You got it, sir." Keanu took a sip, the coffee warming his hands. Behind him, a group of children began playing tag, their laughter echoing across the park. It was the same sound that had followed him through the years: innocence, joy, the reminder of everything worth protecting. He turned to look once more at the bench where he'd fed the birds. The pigeons were gone now, but the crumbs remained a quiet sign that something good had happened there. He smiled, whispering to himself, "Maybe that's enough." Then he walked toward the light. Have you ever helped someone when no one was watching? What incredible story should we tell next about Keanu Reeves?